Welcome to Beyond the Classroom. I'm very excited to introduce today's guest, Dr. Sharron Russell. Dr. Russell is a licensed certified school psychologist and the Director of Positive Education and Student Support at the Shipley School. Welcome, Dr. Russell.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I was so excited to have you as my guest today. I just want to tell the viewers a little bit about how I came to get to know you. I first learned about positive psychology after reading about Dr. Marty Seligman when I was getting my coaching certification, and I had the pleasure of being asked to coach at the World Happiness Summit in Miami, where Dr. Seligman's colleagues were giving a talk and a conference about the science of happiness and mindfulness. And later on that year, I heard about Shipley offering positive education as a conference, and I was lucky enough to be able to attend last June. Fabulous speakers, and I got so excited about it, and I was like, I have to have them on the show. Everybody has to know what positive education is. So that's where I'd like to start today. Could you tell the viewers a little bit about what positive education actually is?
Absolutely. So as you mentioned, positive psychology is an outgrowth of psychology that is trying to focus on what is right with people and how we help people be well. So positive education based on positive psychology is really trying to put well-being at the heart of education. Some people will call it the science of education at its best. It's really doing, honestly, what Shipley has done for many years, having both educational excellence, but also improving character and focusing on well-being for both individuals and the collective, whether that's the school, the community, or even the world is what we're looking at. And, you know, one of the, I would say, taglines from positive psychology is other people matter, and that really resonated with us. And so it's a growing field, and I think the definition will continue to grow and grow as more schools sign on. But I would say that's the working definition of positive education.
And so do you think positive education is something you can actually teach? And if so, how?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way we think about it is it's a practice, not a program. So we've been working on what is called a whole school transformation, where all of our faculty and staff did a retreat in 2017 so that everybody did 3 days, 2 nights away learning positive psychology. And this is every administrator, every secretary, physical plant, teacher. So everybody learned this. And I think once you are both educating your teachers, who we are teaching this, we've been teaching what we call SEED, which is social, emotional, ethical development, for about 25 years. That's a longer story, but we have been teaching social emotional learning for a long time. What is different with positive education is when you teach it to all the adults, then they can model it and integrate it and bring it into the other areas of the school life, so that it doesn't have to live in a social emotional learning class. The Spanish teachers and the secretaries and the head of school can all be using the same language and helping both students, and we call ourselves colleagues, and parents and alumni really understand that well-being is really at the heart of what we're doing.
That's amazing and so great to hear. Yeah. Why do you think this is so important that we're teaching this to young learners today?
I mean, I think everybody, you know, if you read the news or, you know, hear about what's happening with young people and the rates of anxiety and depression that are just skyrocketing, and, you know, I think psychology has focused for so many years on disorders and what's wrong with people and how we can fix them, and that's fantastic, and we've done great work in that. But positive psychology and positive education, as I mentioned, is focusing on what's right with people and how we teach people to flourish and be well and, you know, move beyond just being not sick, right? So there's so much more to life than just being not sick. And so I think that's why it's so important, because we are bombarded with so much negativity and so many negative messages about our young people, and when you work with them and you know them, you know there's a lot more to them than the statistics on anxiety and depression. And then, as I mentioned, you know, the whole school approach, I do think a lot of the adults, you know, the teachers and the staff have said, I've learned so much about myself when I've been practicing mindfulness. I've been a better, whatever it is, wife, teacher, you know, electrician. You know, people are talking about how they feel like they've been able to do the things that are important to them better because of learning these things. So it's this really nice symbiosis between what we want for our students, but we have to have that for ourselves and really model it and work towards that.
And I've talked so many times, I had Jen Beatty on my show last month, who works at Wharton People Analytics with Adam Grant, and we were talking about at the heart of what you do is people.
Yep.
And if we have a common framework with which to communicate and express ourselves, we raise the collective consciousness of everybody around us. And that's really our point. I mean, education is that. You know, yes, it's content, sure, but it's also how we want to raise people to function in society as well.
Absolutely.
And it just can't be underestimated. And, you know, you were talking about anxiety and depression being an all-time high. I just saw the Pew report, and it said in American high schools, anxiety and depression are as common as the common cold. And that there are states like Delaware right now that are putting into law where schools have to start addressing mental health education in schools. It can't be separate and apart or somebody else's problem. It's now up to all of us.
Absolutely.
And like you said, if we can't put the oxygen mask on ourselves first, and you know, because we're all walking in with our own stuff and our own set of experiences, right? That you can't separate those experiences to how you show up in front of a group of students. And if we can help ourselves first, then we can be fully present to the students that are in front of us to powerfully serve them.
Absolutely.
So I just think it's so important. What other schools in the U.S. are using the whole school positive education transformative approach?
So I know we're the first school, which is really exciting, and we've modeled our work after the Geelong Grammar School in Geelong, which is just outside of Melbourne, Australia. There are other schools who are doing some good work in PosEd. There's people who have directors of positive education, and they're working on kind of where do we begin, you know, kind of dipping their toe in the water. Do we maybe teach a positive psychology class? Do we take a group of volunteers? You know, how do we put this in? But as far as I know, I believe we're the only school doing the whole school transformation, where we went in and said everybody is learning this, everybody's doing it. We're putting it in our professional development series. We're putting it in the curriculum beyond social emotional learning. So that's my understanding. That's, you know, I wouldn't want to certify, but I know, and I collaborate with a lot of the schools across the country that are working, and there were so many people at the conference last June, locally and from around the country, who their hearts are so in this and they want to do it. So there are absolutely teachers in so many schools like yourself who are working to bring what they can and maybe bring some people along. But, you know, the whole school approach and really having everybody on the same page, it's not easy, but it's absolutely the road that we wanted to take to do this.
And I love the enthusiasm that you went all in. You know, too often in education, we kind of try to piecemeal initiatives together in the hopes of creating something greater. And sometimes that works, right? But but other times I found that you're missing the connective tissue that really makes a program thrive. And so I'm thrilled to hear that you guys went all in on this. How long have you been doing? When did you start with positive education?
So really, we started talking about positive education with that name in around 2016. We worked with one of Dr. Seligman's postdoc students, Dr. Alejandro Adler, who has since moved on to the United Nations, working on their Sustainable Development Goals. So he worked with us. He actually planned our entire retreat in 2017 and brought the very talented group of students from Penn's Masters in Applied Positive Psychology, or MAP program, which Dr. Seligman runs, and they really worked with us on the retreats that we did in 2017. But I would say in spirit, we've been doing a version since 1995 when we began really focusing on social emotional learning for the students. But as a whole school positive ed, you know, really working with people at Penn and Geelong, I'd say 2016, 2017.
And so what are the differences then, would you say, between the SEED program that you were mentioning before, your character development program, and positive ed?
So the differences for me, and I was the person hired in 1995 to start writing and teaching what we now call SEED. It was for the students, and we had a class and it met, and it's still on. Every student at Shipley, pre-K through 12, meets at least once a week, sometimes twice, with a SEED teacher. So it's a curriculum, it's a scope and sequence. We meet when math meets. But what we found is it was in a silo, and the other teachers didn't know the great work we were doing in SEED. And the physical planner, the secretaries, they just didn't have the information. So for me, the difference is really bringing all of the adults and making it community-wide, which I think just enhances what happens in the SEED classes, because if the math teacher says, oh, what is your top character strength? And the student says, oh, you know what those are? Well, it's bravery, or, you know, and the teacher says, great, let's use that today in what we're working on. Then everything is getting reinforced. And, you know, I think, as I had said, that symbiotic relationship is what enhances both sides of teaching, whether it's social, emotional, or typical content. So that's a longer answer.
No, that's a great answer. Thank you. And so have you thought about training or having your parents and board of directors go and get trained or, you know, to the retreats as well?
Yes, so we invited our whole community to last year's June conference. So there actually were a handful of parents and people from our board of trustees present at the June 2019 conference. We've done, I would say, a smattering of parent events. We did a launch event in 2017 to let parents know what this was, what it was about. Last year we piloted a parent series that met about 8 times for an interested group of 4th grade parents. And it was a combination of child development and positive ed. So we're still trying to figure out what the best avenue is. We have lots of different parent groups and parent volunteer groups, and just really figuring out what's the best place and where do they want to come and learn this, because they definitely do. And, you know, it's just the time and the place and how you make it available is something we're definitely working on and hope to really have fine-tuned for next year.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, like, even broadening that scope of having every level of stakeholder involved and communicating using the same language would be just
so amazing.
I mean,
and we're thinking potentially using some video methods and things, because, you know, parents' time is precious and, you know, they're working and doing other things, and although they want to be there, it's just difficult. A challenge.
When I was at the conference, one of the things that really spoke to me when they were talking was live, learn, teach, embed. Could you explain or go into a little bit of detail what that is?
Absolutely. So that's the model that the Geelong Grammar School developed for schools to do a whole school transformation. So the 4 areas, learn, live, teach, embed, each have steps underneath of them. There's 5 steps under learn, 5 under live, and then what they've actually given is a rubric. And so for each of those steps, you talk about, if you're introducing it maintaining or consolidating, maintaining, sorry. And you kind of grade yourself on where you're headed in those areas. And what's nice is that you don't have to think this up from scratch. They're a school who's been doing this for 12 years. I think they're in their 12th year. And Dr. Seligman lived in Australia and trained them with a team of experts. So following their model has just been really helpful. And knowing, if we say, leadership is supportive, well, okay, so when you're introducing, what does that look like? What does it look like when you're consolidating and when you're maintaining that over time? And so we use it as a yardstick and also as a planning tool. So it's a little bit of kind of grading ourselves, but also looking ahead. So what else is there that we can do that's, as far as we know, best practice from the school that's been doing this far longer than we have.
And I loved it when he was talking about Embed. That's what really spoke to me.
Yeah.
To not just be a proponent of teaching it and delivering it curricularly, but living it, breathing it, and having it be such an automatic part of how you show up in the world every single day is what makes, to me, the program absolutely fly off the charts.
Yep. And it's how you know with a program that, when it's embedded, it doesn't matter if I'm there or somebody else. This doesn't belong to Sharron Russell. This belongs to the school, and it's part of the policy and the procedure and your daily operating, how discipline is done and, how personnel manuals are written, and we're still working on those. That's kind of, you're doing some of it as you go, but the learning and living is where we really started with colleagues and the student piece, because we wanted people to really feel it. And then this year, the teach part and the embed are what we're starting to tackle somewhat.
And that actually is a beautiful segue to my next question. You brought up discipline.
Yeah.
How has it changed, not only the way discipline is handled, but the way that kids walk away from a situation in which they've been disciplined?
Yeah, I mean, luckily we don't have a lot of discipline issues, if I'm really being honest, and honesty and integrity have always been at the heart of what we do with discipline. So kids know if they tell you what they did right away, it's always going to be better for them, and that's always been part of the ethos. I think that is really part of the embed phase, and we're still working out how that, will add value to how we're doing discipline. But really, honestly, the heart of Shipley has always been about relationships, and if you care about another person and they care about you, discipline is about holding people to high expectations because you care. And so that has always been part of how we've done things. And so I think this will just add more value to kind of formalizing some of that as best we can in policy.
And I would have to think that restorative practices would play very nicely.
Yeah, they definitely do.
Into how you're handling things and how you're welcoming people back in the fold after something has gone awry. We are flawed human beings, and we are talking about children that have to make mistakes in order to learn. So I would imagine that would be a big component.
And the nice part of positive education is that it is, whatever metaphor, umbrella, or we can include a lot of other programs and practices because it's a practice. So restorative justice, the classroom models, different curriculum, different programs, they all have a place. Emotional intelligence work under positive education, because it doesn't exclude and say, oh, well, you can't have restorative practices if you do positive ed. Well, no, it fits right in, and if that's a great model for the current situation, then we can use it and make it work.
Yeah, and that was another thing that I really loved about what they were talking about, because sometimes you go to conferences and it's, this is our model, and you either use it or you can't. And I loved that there was so much flexibility. It really, to me, was about bringing all of the best to powerfully serve in a way that's going to make people thrive. And that's what we're here to do.
I agree.
Regardless of where you teach. That's what we're here to do.
Right.
So I loved it. I can't talk about it enough. You've mentioned before about how the values of positive education contribute to positive life outcomes, including academic performance.
Yep.
So what have been the positive outcomes on academic performance since having implemented positive education?
I think that's a hard one to answer when you're in a school that has such high academic performers, you know. So our students do very well and have always done very well academically. And so for me, it's more about the individual well-being and the collective well-being and building that. Making sure that they have the capacity to fulfill their academic potential is how I see it. Like I don't expect, you know, SAT scores to go up or some of those other metrics. I think our scores are very high already. So then that's not what we put a lot of focus on. And I think students, you know, love of learning is a part of our mission, and finding something that you're passionate about. And when you think of Marty Seligman's model for well-being, so achievement is part of it, and that is PERMA is positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning, and achievement. So he has always had part of the model that achievement and accomplishment is what we're all striving for. But I think relationships being at the heart of that, and meaning and purpose, and finding things that you love, you would do so much whether you got a grade or got paid for it. And so that's what I'm really hoping we build in our students and our community, is that love of learning and that meaning and that purpose and that engagement to a level. And yes, we want them to achieve and be good academic students, but I feel as though many schools are doing that, you know. So our point is, yes, we're going to work on that, and it's important, and our students are amazing achievers and national merit and great, but we want them to be good citizens and good to themselves and good to each other.
And it's not an either or, it's an
Exactly.
and.
Exactly.
You know, you can
Yes.
have both.
Yes.
Right? You can have both.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the impact on the faculty and
Sure.
how has this changed their teaching, if at all?
So this year we're working on the teach part of the Learn, Live, Teach, Embed, and I just met with my faculty group yesterday. We meet monthly as we call them learning design teams. So the positive ed team met yesterday to talk about what's going well, what are they integrating, you know, what's working. So I have a self-selected group who have really been kind of first adopters. And so just listening to them talk, you know, the kindergarten teacher who they do a character strength, you know, we do a character strength of the month. And so she's really used that with her kindergarten group, and they draw pictures and they try to explain it. And she said they're very cute on self-control was January, and they remind each other about their self-control, and open-mindedness is what they're working on this month. So I feel like teachers have taken the parts that were meaningful and resonant to them and found ways to apply it. And what I'm working on now is formalizing that and saying, okay, so you've tried that and that's worked really well in Spanish and that's worked well in kindergarten. What do we now formalize in the curriculum? So if you leave, the next person who comes along says, oh, this unit, you know, on preterite tense works really well with this character strength. And so that's the next phase that we're working on, is how the teachers outside of our SEED curriculum, because the SEED teachers have been teaching direct instruction in many of these skills for many years. So this is the application and the next layer. You know, like I said, when the math teacher encourages your strength and the science teacher, you know, talks about your well-being and things like that. That's what I've seen happening, and that's where kind of this organic growth is happening. So we're trying to do it both organically and then supporting from the top with resources and professional development and curriculum planning.
And so you've had a group of students start from kindergarten and they're now 6 years into the program, what do you notice differently about their interactions, how they're showing up to learn, how they're handling setbacks?
So what's interesting with the students, our students have had the seed class for a long, long time. So it's hard for me to say very specifically what's different. I think, you know, as we get further down into the regular content teachers, having the direct conversations, I think that's where some of the resilience that we want, and, you know, the conflicts and building grit and those pieces will take even more hold. I think our students know a lot of the language about emotions and awareness and relationships and connectedness, and we do measures of our 6th to 12th graders every year. We have a universal screening that they all take on their own well-being and also anxiety and depression, and so we're asking them, and we're seeing improvements. We see very high connectedness already, which is great. We're seeing slight decreases in anxiety and depression, which is amazing given the rates that are going, you know, through the roof in the world. So, you know, I think I can probably pinpoint anecdotally, but I would say in our data, we are seeing, you know, well-being. I think when what you measure is treasured, right? So the kids know we care. So we keep asking about this, and we keep, you know, putting things in their different classrooms. So that's what we'll keep an eye on.
Sounds great. What's on the horizon for Positive Education?
So this coming June, we are hosting our 2nd annual conference, and we're very excited that Dr. Seligman will be kicking off the conference with a keynote. His latest book is called Agency, and he will be talking on Friday, June 12th about that book and positive psychology. It's his first talk on that book in the United States, I think actually anywhere. So that's exciting for us that we have him kicking off our conference. And then the following Monday and Tuesday, June 15th and 16th, Dr. Lee Waters, who is a fantastic, brilliant speaker out of the University of Melbourne. She wrote a book called The Strength Switch. She spoke at Shipley in 2018 to our colleagues and parents. And she will be doing a training called Visible Wellbeing, which is a great foundational positive education course. So for any school who's wanted to know, where do I start, how do I do this at my school, her 2-day training is perfect introduction. And then the Wednesday and Thursday, June 17th and 18th, we have the Institute for Positive Ed out of Geelong Grammar. And they are doing 4 topics that we're calling deeper dives. So people who did the conference last year will be able to further their knowledge. They're doing character strengths a whole day, positive sport, which we're really excited about because we think sports and athletics can use this work. They're doing the science of achievement, and they're also talking about resilience. So we have an exciting week planned for people, and I think it's going to be really well attended, and hopefully we'll continue to spread the word and the message that, you know, flourishing is for everybody and well-being is for everybody, and how do we get this in every school.
And if people would like more information, where can they contact you?
The best place is through the Shipley website, which is www.shipleyschool.org. And if you wanted to go just to the section on positive ed, it's /positive.
Great. That's all we have time for today. Thank you, Dr. Russell, for being our guest. This is Diana Ahl, reminding you to always take life's lessons beyond the classroom.